Welcome, everybody.
Hello,
Hello,
yay!
Suzanne. Hi, Kim. Welcome, Kay. Jillian,
Jill, yes.
yes.
Hey.
Kim, yeah,
Hi,
look at this.
Kim.
Two
Kim,
Kims.
Sam.
Damn.
Sam, I see a Jim Laughlin on the roster. Hi, Carrie.
Nice.
Hello.
Carrie. If y'all want to play, Kathy, welcome. Betty Ross,
Betty Ross,
welcome.
the first
Been a
Lantern
long
class.
time.
Boom.
Wow.
This is already good for the soul.
It is. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
And we're done. All we needed to do is
Thank
see your
you.
faces.
That's it. Good luck.
Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Hey, I can't see you guys though. What am I doing wrong here?
Rest.
Let's see. Zoom.
We can see you.
Nice
I
view.
know. I can see myself. It's so lovely.
A few other people lurking off a video. Jim Laughlin, Shauna, yes. I think I saw Adam Wester.
Yeah. We'll give it just a couple more minutes.
Thanks for making us part of your Wednesday.
Thanks for setting it up.
We are so glad you are here. This morning, we were blessed with snow on the mountaintops in Park City again.
Oh my God.
So it is a, I don't know, spring, winter, summer day, classic. Heart Space is missing all of you. We miss you. We're really grateful to reconvene today. So thanks so much for making the time.
This is the Indiana office that some of you have seen. Brian is holding down the fort at a new home office in Portland, Maine. There's Jim.
Feels great. Great to see everybody.
Welcome, Jim and Adam. And for though I'm not sure if everybody's met Brian and Sierra, they're Team Plenty. Sierra, many of you have met, holding down the fort in Heart Space in Park City. But in case you haven't, are incredible rock stars to put names and faces with. So why don't we get started, Jeff? You want to kick us off?
I'd love to. So there's already a few phrases that are incredibly overused over the last 3 months. We're not using the word pivot anymore. We're trying not to use times of uncertainty anymore, but we decided that we do one last use of navigating uncertainty because, as some of you know, over the last 3 months, we've been doing a lot of talking and a lot of listening and asking people like you, our close friends, our clients, kind of what they need. And there's been, I would say, themes across the board, but this theme consistently has been one that every single person has talked to us about, and usually using this term, like, how do I navigate this uncertainty, and what does this tell me about what is actually certain in my life, which is a really deeper implication. So we wanted to just gather this group together and say hello. We get as much out of seeing this group as hopefully you get out of being a part of it. And we wanted to maybe give you a few tools as we go into the summer about this exact topic, and also in our way, give you a chance to connect with each other. So we're going to do the best we can to do Heart Space right in the next hour, and we're going to do a little bit of pod work and a little bit of small group work, and maybe share some wisdom from all of us.
Yeah, so you'll have an opportunity to meet each other in a couple minutes. We're going to put you in breakout rooms, the new feature of Zoom that works quite well. And then we'll cue you to come on back. But we'll explore this topic of what's working for you during this time of great change and the great pause as we emerge into a new phase of creation. And how can we rely on each other's lights to do so, and the light within us most importantly. So before we get started, I'm gonna ask that we close our eyes in just a second, but we lost a lantern light yesterday. One of our graduates from October 2019 Lantern, Jamie Kim, passed away of breast cancer. And so we just wanted to ask if you all wouldn't mind just taking a moment of silence and sending your light to their family and to her son and to her husband as we send them healing and send them courage and send them our love and our strength as she transitions from one form of light into the infinite form of light. And from this space, maybe we can just close our eyes and drop into our hearts as we connect light to light. How lucky we are right now to be in form, to have the gift of our breath, the gift of this connection, the gift to choose to show up with the blessings, the support, the life force that we've been given today. And we just tune into our heart spaces as we settle, as we become present. We calm, we trust, and we allow the benevolence of the higher light, whatever we name that to be, to protect us, to infuse us, and to inspire us to speak our truths and shine our light, to have the courage to show up, the courage to know that our paths are unfolding in perfect order, whether we know it to be or not. May we ask to be used for the good. May we be asked to be used for harmony, to create peace in ourselves and peace in the world, as we literally co-create a new way of being, knowing that showing up today is enough because you are enough. We are enough together. Taking a deep breath and then just sending out that goodness, that purity of you to everyone on this call and all those who could not be here today. And with that, we open our eyes. So from that space, I'd love to have you meet each other. We're going to give you about 10 minutes to introduce yourself, share who you are and where you're from, and explore what's one practice that's working for you to navigate this time of uncertainty. So we know things are working for you, right? And so maybe explore what's one thing that's been really helpful or that you're noticing that's working for you as you navigate this time of unpredictability, of change, of unrest. And then we'll bring you back to discuss it.
And this is where I say what I would say in heart space, which is we're going to give you 10 minutes, which might mean 15, but we really mean no longer than that. So resist the urge to tell us what's present now and one thing that's working, and maybe just be generous and give everyone a little bit of chance to contribute as well.
Sound good? Okay, we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Brian's going to put you into breakout rooms and enjoy meeting each other. Welcome back, everybody. It's a great trick of Zoom, so you don't have to look at yourself because it enhances your ability to be present. So you're not looking like a mirror.
How do you do that? I've been wanting to know how to do that forever.
Yeah, so on your picture, there's 3 dots, and if you click it, and it says hide self view.
Yeah.
And it really changes how present you are.
You're not distracted by your own
Negative self-talk.
gesturisms.
Yeah, no, I critique the hell out of myself when I'm talking. So now I don't want to see myself. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So much better.
Well, you know how this works. Let's try it. Let's bubble up. Anyone want to share either what they heard about navigating uncertainty from someone else that resonated, or what you shared, or just how you felt? Let's go. We can go meta too. How it was to be in conversation with people you don't know, but you do know. Who wants to share?
Oh, it's always the like who goes first. I'll go. Okay, well, Jeff and Jen, you'll appreciate this most about me because I do remember at Lantern, very first day, saying like, "What's the agenda? Like, what are we going to cover?" And I'm a planner by nature, so take uncertain times for like, whatever you had planned for tomorrow, that shit's not happening. It makes me feel crazy. I'm going with the flow. How about that? I'm totally like, it took me like a good week and a half to 2 weeks to get there. It was super uncomfortable and I fought it for a lot. And now I'm just like, oh, yeah, okay, well, that's what's happening later today. Oh, that's cool. That's coming up for tomorrow. All right. I feel like I'm probably like not as productive in the planning sense, but it sure feels more sane. I don't know.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a whole new way of being right now. Good practice. What else? What else did you hear or share?
I'll share. I was just
Hi,
gonna say, I
Sam.
think I've been struggling lately, and I don't know if struggling is the best word, but I've been really sort of like thinking over and kind of like unpacking in my head just this weird sort of mixture of feeling, right, that we have right now. Because I think I started off with this whole thing really well. I was already sort of hunkered down, starting a new business and just a hermit anyway. So it didn't feel that different. And I work remote a lot anyway. But I found that the past month or so, which I know has been tough for a million reasons for everyone, I've just found this very, very strange like confluence of emotion, because at the same time as there's all this horrible stuff going on, I'm so hopeful that it can create change and that this is a tipping point. And then there's, personal things that are big wins with a new business and my team and personally. And but then at the same time there's just, so it's a weird feeling to have all these emotions when there's an overarching cloud of emotion that we're all in at the same time. And even just the news about Jamie, I mean, that was who I did the stare into your eyes for, however
Mm.
long, when in October. And so it's just like, it's such a strange feeling to have personal emotional things bubble up because it's under the cloud of this just crazy emotional atmosphere that we're in otherwise. And it's just been a weird thing to think through that, because it adds sort of like a odd perspective on your personal stuff that you're going through. And so I don't know if there's any point to that. It's just something that I've been kind of mulling over myself.
I love that. I would tie those two together before we go to another and say, I think I find myself also, Sam, struggling with, there's such a difference between calm and, inner calm and complacency. And I think when George Floyd was killed and the protests started, and so many of us kind of up and said, wait, this is exposing things that we should have been upset about anyway and should have been acting and talking about anyway. It did. I think for me, like I went to that place for a couple weeks, and it was kind of interesting to observe how quickly I forgot about COVID and coronavirus and all of that. And I have found some calm, but it's interesting to read the headlines today. Cases aren't decreasing, and there's another 20,000 new cases a day. And I found myself asking, like, is this calm that I've developed, is it actually just acceptance that this tragedy is going to go on? And where's the difference between being calm but action oriented versus being resigned that it's going to, being okay with it being terrible? I don't know if that makes sense either, but I definitely find myself struggling with that a little bit.
Totally.
Well, and I would just add to that, and that is that with all of these things that are happening in the country and in our cities, and then knowing what feels best in terms of how we engage. So how do we participate in being part of the change that we'd like to be part of? We have an election season coming up. The normal ways we would engage aren't available, and many aren't safe even when they are available. So I think that's one of the things that I've certainly been struggling with is how to feel like I'm effectively engaging around things that really matter, and what I can do best in terms of those conversations that I have with other people. Just wrestling with that in the midst of being pretty much isolated.
Yeah. And it sounds trite to say, but I would comment that I think one of the things that we've been verbalizing more than ever is that there's no instructions for this time. Like there's no playbook to say, Kim, you should show up this way when at this time, and this is what you should say. And I think that is asking all of us to continue the slow down, to say, like what feels authentic for me to share and show up. And that's a giant experiment. And sometimes it feels like the showing up is in the void of not knowing, or the waiting, or the watching, or the not saying anything. And then it rises and says, I've got to do something now. And it gets clearer. But for me, it's like reminding me not to act when I know when I know, and when I don't know, I need to give it space so that I can feel more true to how I can show up in a way that's really resonant with my skills, my voice, my community, my reach, in a way that isn't taking on somebody else's way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that too, because I'm trying to understand, what is that? Where does that show up? More to say, but I really appreciate and resonate with that.
Can I jump in?
Yes,
One of the
Susan.
things that I've done over the last couple of weeks, I've been reading just more for pleasure and Reconnecting Book Club. And one of the books that I read was about people surviving the Holocaust. And at the time I was like, man, this is probably the wrong thing to read right now, because I have an perhaps, unfounded fear of us going to war in the midst of all of this. But it helped me to remember that other times during our world's history, things have felt completely chaotic for other people. And thankfully, the story that I read was about a family that was split up and persecuted, but every family member made it through the Holocaust and was able to reunite. And it really did remind me and inspire me on how resilient the human spirit is, even when you don't know when the end's in sight. So what started out, a little doubtful, like, is this the right time to read this particular book, ended up really helping me to remember that we have stronger reserves than we sometimes recognize.
Yeah. This is not what we were planning to talk about, but I just watched a TED Talk about three strategies essentially to fortify your resilience. And it was a woman researcher who spent the past decade studying resiliency and how families of the Holocaust and families of tragedy, and men and women, and how they rise up when tragedy strikes. And in her research, as she's coming out with her book, she ends up losing her daughter in a tragic car accident. So going from the researcher of resiliency to being the victim of it, and just the real story of how she, as a parent, dealt with the loss of her child. And her 3 key takeaways were, one is like this humility that when shitty things happen, it's to not take the victim approach, meaning life, like shit happens to everyone. Like life is dark and light. Life has its losses and its life, giving forces and celebrations and tragedies. And she saw that the commonality of resilient people was not this arrogance around why did this happen only to me, but that this is kind of a collective journey of the human journey. The second was focus, and focusing on hope, which was so plenty, right? This idea that I know there will be something good that can come out of this, or hope for something to thrive and survive out of whatever the loss is. And then 3 was gratitude. She studied and then practiced her own kind of wisdom of making sure that every day she was focusing on 3 things to be grateful for. And I thought, to Suzanne, to that point, it just was really helpful. I ended up sharing those 3 tips with my son, who's recovering from a really scary, difficult knee injury and surgery, and he can't walk right now. And it was very helpful. So
I do think there's maybe as we go into a little quick curriculum for you to consider over the next couple of weeks, I do think there is a reflection point for all of us as conscious leaders around this idea of tragedy brings out the best in us. So you may know that we started a podcast. One of the first guests on our podcast was B, who's right in the center of my screen. And that episode ended up being a little bit about this idea that, Jen calls the Mack truck moment, that many people personally in their lives had this big thing that happens to them. I lost my mom to cancer. My dad died in a car accident, and it changes your trajectory and it gives you more gratitude. And B was kind of playing with this idea that the same thing happens to societies, right? And we're living through one now. And that thread, B, has been a thread in every single person we've had on the podcast since you've been on. And I think I'm so excited for the gifts that are coming from this. People seem more calm, they seem more aware, wanting to create more space, at least some people do, wanting to create more equity and equality and go beyond that to create justice. And yet the cost is really fucking high. So like, how do we learn in our personal lives, but also as a community, to not need tragedy to help people who are less fortunate, to appreciate our life, to get off the hamster wheel? And that I think is what we wanted to talk about a little bit with practices around navigating uncertainty. And the core question is, was it ever really certain before? Like, what about before, either before George Floyd or before the pandemic or before the economic collapse? Like, what was it that felt certain, and how do we unpack that a little bit? So there's 3 things that we wanted to share with you that are kind of like question marks that we're playing with, that we thought might be helpful for you to play with a little bit too.
Yeah, that's the giant joke, right? Where we've placed our power in the idea that there ever was certainty. And I think the more power we place in that, the more wake-up call we're getting, right? But if that was the illusion, what can we know for certain is true? That certainty is in here. So the 3 things we wanted to cover with you today is like these practices of uncertainty is 1, to question your position. 2 is to attune your attention to what is here and now. And 3 is assume good intent within yourself and within others. So maybe we'll unpack that together as Jeff and I dance a bit. Jeff, do you want to take the first one, or you want me to do that?
Yeah, I'll lead in. So the first idea is just questioning whether you know something is true. And maybe the analogy I'd use to tee this off is my youngest son, Danny, who's now 11. has this love-hate experience with amusement parks, which seems really quaint now to think about even going to an amusement park. But cast your mind back a year ago, we would go to Cedar Point, which is in Ohio, the roller coaster capital of the world, by the way. It's awesome. And Danny's first reaction before we go on any ride is, I'm going to hate this and I'm going to die. Like, that's how he starts. That's his frame of reference, is this will be awful. And I think the idea of questioning your position is we do that to ourselves, maybe not in that extreme of a way, but whether it's like I see something on Facebook that I disagree with and I immediately decide it's wrong, or I read something that's stressful and I immediately decide it has a negative impact on me. We often, without knowing it, are the 10-year-old saying, I'm going to hate this, before we understand if it's real or not.
Yeah, so when we don't question whether we know it to be true, for sure, and how do I know it to be true? Those are really powerful questions that just open up different answers, and they take us out of being positional. And honestly, that is the challenge that we're seeing surface in society right now, is position silos, which perpetuates separation. Right or wrong, black or white, Democratic, Republican, good or bad, whatever. Like, it creates position of antagonistic defense, right? And it requires us to then get into a place of proving, of selling, right? Of convincing. And all of a sudden, we're now on this thought train of factual, I know more than you, this is my case. So that question of really making sure we're stopping ourselves and asking before telling, right? And being curious with, do I know this to be true? How do I know it to be true? What else do I need to know so that I can be in dialogue with it? I love, Jeff, that example. I had this exact example on Facebook this morning through a friend of mine who saw me post something that was around educating our community about the voting with the local government versus the state government. She assumed I was perpetuating not voting for a certain person. The assumption hit me like really strongly. I was like, what made you think of that? And I could see all of a sudden the thought train, the actions, the behavior, the projection happen as a result of that positional thinking. So just taking that moment to pause in terms of what you're sharing or how you're engaging, of asking yourself, do I really know this to be true? Do I not, what else do I need to know? Is really helpful. The second is attuning our attention. And what we mean by that is, the future appears to be uncertain, and it can be scary at times if we're placing our power there. If we're placing our focus on the what ifs, what could be, those future scenarios, we take ourselves out of right here. And it has been spoken about, we talk about at Lantern ad nauseum around the power of presence and being here. What we mean by that right now is literally going back to the basics of, what do I see? What do I hear? How am I feeling in my body? What am I noticing? Even on a Zoom call, for example, what body language are you observing? Is somebody there, or are they tuning out? Somebody distracted? Is somebody asking you to repeat what you just said 3 times? We're getting all these cues, but we're running really fast that we're missing those cues. And that's when the Mack truck comes, right? So the gift of this time is literally taking our future thinking, like drawing it back, and it's natural, but just catching ourselves when we're going here, or what if, or the plans, Carrie, that you were talking about. Yeah, we need to make some plans, But how much power are we giving those? Can we draw that back to the cues that we're being shown right here in the moment?
Yeah, I'd go back to, Danny in line for the Gemini at Cedar Point and saying, I'm going to hate this. The way we get through 30 minutes in line is, and you've done this yourself with your own kids, or your parents did it with you. Hey, Danny, look at that butterfly. Oh, look at that bee. Let's count the number of umbrellas that are walking by, right? It's a constant bringing back to where we are right now. And I would observe one thing that's really interesting, by the way. We've had so many of our clients or past clients or once were clients, not clients anymore, have conversations where, particularly about the economy, people have said to us, well, shit, if we don't get any sales or we don't get any donors, we're done. We're out of business. And two things I'd say about that. The first is our common response is, well, when has that ever not been true? That's always true. So what was it that, and yeah, the conditions are different. I don't want to make light of it. And they're trickier and the ground seems more unsettled and the roller coaster's rumbling really loud. But it's always been the case that if you don't get sales, you'll go out of business. And it's always been the case that if you don't have donors, that you won't function anymore. So let's not exaggerate that future. The other thing I'd observe is in our world right now, it seems that we heavily emphasize or give a lot of credibility to future thinking that's negative. And we call that practical and we call that scenario planning. But any future thinking that's positive, we call that airy-fairy and a waste of time. And I just to me, the blush is off the rose a little bit. If we can engage in all this negative planning about what might happen and make ourselves miserable, certainly we can at least do as much positive thinking and visualizing what's going to happen when we create a better world together. So you can only see that imbalance though if you're right here and you give yourself a little bit of time to say, well, is this real? Right? What's real for me right now? And the real for me right now might just be, I do the work that's in front of me and I trust that, something else is coming later, right? Lantern, we only have to see what's right in front of us. So that
Can I just make a comment on that? We were talking to a client yesterday and she labeled herself as a realist. And I think to this point, it's what is real for you is what you believe to be true. My brother, some of you have heard me say this at Lantern, but his favorite line that it makes me want to puke at times is, the reality is, Jennifer. The reality is what he's seeing and believing to be true. And that is forming what he sees. So again, really being intentional about where we are putting our beliefs in so that we see. Not I see, so I believe, but I believe so I can see. What do we believe in a better world so we actually can create this new place, this new way of honoring and working together and seeing each other and treating each other as equal? The only way that happens is if we believe that to be true. It doesn't work the other way around of seeing versus believing. And that's that re-architecture that we're in. We're in this upheaval, upending of paradigms that almost things are flipping itself on its head, the reversal mode, so that we can create this new society that is beckoning us to bring forth.
So the first one's question your position. Do I know this to be true? And the second one is bring your attention back here, right? Lantern, I only have to see what's right in front of us. Here's the third that I think we've been practicing the last maybe 6 or 8 weeks. At Lantern, we talk about the fourth light, that there's a larger light guiding us. And in our work with teams, we often give a ground rule in our retreats of assume good intent. In other words, when someone talks, assume they mean it from a place of creating something better for the team. And it has occurred to us over the last 8 weeks that is what the larger light guiding us. It's the same instruction for the world around us. Assume good intent, right? assume that you don't get to architect the path that we're all on, because you don't. But what if it ends up well? And there are so many unlikely messengers. Many of you probably watched Al Sharpton give the eulogy for George Floyd, and he talked about the unlikely messenger. Supreme Court Justice Judge Neil Gorsuch is another very unlikely messenger for someone like me who wanted to see that ruling. When he was appointed, everybody on the liberal side said, we're screwed. The civil rights legislation will never get passed. He wrote it. It's not to say that the cost, I think we need to reconcile with the cost. And I want to bring that point back. Like, the cost we have paid for some of these realizations is too high, and we need to figure out how to minimize the cost. But there's good intent in the architecture. And that's what a larger light guiding us means, is that I may not like the rumble of the roller coaster. I may think it's out to get me. It may be agonizing to wait for it. But at the end of the day, the ride is going to be fulfilling and fun if I let it, right? If I don't tense up in my seat. So that's the third point, is assuming good intent.
Yeah, I love that articulation, Jeff, that you just shared. I think the reminder that if there's a larger light guiding us, and that we have a light, and that light is always on, whether we're feeling clouded, living in a cloud, as you were sharing, Sam, ups and downs, this mix of emotion, that actually that light is within each one of us. And it is always there, and it comes with us wherever we go. So how can we look for the light in each other? Like, that's what good intent means. Like, we are actually breaking the cycle of the negative projection. So if somebody disagrees with us, or a party disagrees with us, guess what we look for? We look for that disagreement. We look for evidence so that we can then fortify our position, right? If we're assuming good intent, it opens us to see something that may surprise us, to have a commonality, to find that common ground, to say, where do we agree, instead of looking for all the places we disagree. Neurons that fire together wire together. It's the basis of neuroscience. Joe Dispenza, if you're not familiar with him, has incredible research around how we literally can heal our bodies through rewiring our brain through thought patterns. So the more we're on the thought train of discord, of disagreement, of positional thinking, that neural pathway deepens, and it's easier to just fortify that habit. But honestly, so is looking for the light in others. So is assuming good intent. If we keep practicing that muscle, every time we're on a new call with some stranger that we haven't met, or we're talking with a family member, or our spouses or partners or children, like, if we could assume good intent, we can also deepen that neural pathway that will help to create more harmonious relationships. We'll find easier solutions. We'll meet each other at a place that is less discord, that has less discord, right? And again, there's no instructions for how this looks. But if we show up with that intention that, wow, I'm going to look for the light in somebody else, because I know I want them to see it in me. I want to be seen that way. Then what's possible with that type of focus?
And I
So
would,
go ahead.
oh, well, I just want to, and I would expand it beyond other people and say to life itself. We're talking about, like, giving the universe a chance to do its work on your behalf, right? And not being in resistance to it. We've often quoted Michael Neal, who's a 3 Principles writer and thinker, and he has a wonderful line about faith. He says that faith isn't the belief that everything will work out the way you want it to be. Faith is the knowing that however things work out, you'll be okay. And it certainly feels, I think that's what we're trying to get at here, is assuming that the machinery is good, right? That there's a cosmic plan that we don't get to be a part of, or we get to be a small part of, we don't get to read the blueprints. And that while the machinations can seem really jarring and can be tragic, that it's going to work out in a way that you're going to be okay. And the thing that gums up the machine is pushing against it, is deciding that it's broken. So that's not to, and every podcast we've said that, that's not to minimize the cost we have paid. And as conscious leaders, it's our job to try to reduce the cost, right? We shouldn't need a pandemic wake-up call or an economic free fall to give everyone the same rights, as an example. So what are we going to take from that experience that makes a better world? Like, how does that actually translate into something that's positive for all of us? The big thing that we're talking about.
And to bring that all the way back to Carrie, your first sharing about going with the flow, as even though, you know, it sounds so easy to do, like loosening the grip right now, like opening so that we can be escorted into the river of what's possible, what's more certain for us, what do we know to be true with us? We can bring that forth in the dance of the creation that we're trying to walk our paths and light, to be the light and to give the light. So it's crazy that it's already top of the hour. Jeff and I had all these intentions to bubble up and blah, blah, blah. So we have 1 minute left. We miss you all. We're so grateful for you. We can't thank you enough for being part of Lantern, being part of our Plenty community, being part of our hearts. We'd love to invite you back. We are hosting Lantern 2 for those of you who are not yet registered in September. We would love to have you come. Yes, we have our October class for Lantern is already full with a wait list. So please, please think about if you're comfortable coming. We'd love to have you in September for Lantern 2. And then check out our podcast. We have some juicy conversations, and we really appreciate you showing up and sharing your light. So be so well. Love you all. Miss you all. To be continued.
More to come.
Stay well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.